I'd like to call the hearing to order and welcome our guests. Obviously, we got a full committee room as there's interest in this. And I'd like to start by recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Over the past year, we have participated in 5 hearings at which we've dug into TSCA, learning the issues section by section, and thinking about how we could make this law work better. In recent weeks, we've had several conversations on a member level. We've exchanged thoughts on where we can find common ground. Our staffs have sat down on a bipartisan basis for many hours to discuss language before us in the Chemicals and Commerce Act. Those conversations have helped us understand each other's perspective much better. That work is continuing, and I hope will help us as members to collaborate on a bill we can embrace going forward. Today, we give a wide variety of stakeholders a chance to weigh in. We'll hear from big and small chemical makers and from those who use chemicals to make consumer products. We'll hear from chemical distributors, labor unions, and other interested groups. Their testimony will show that making laws is a very dynamic process. I unveiled a discussion draft because I think we need a collaborative process with diverse input. That draft is likely to undergo changes as we work through the provisions to find consensus. If each member of this subcommittee sat down to write a TSCA bill, we'd probably have 25 different versions, no 2 of which would look alike. Our job is to craft a bill that reflects the best of all of us. So where might there be common ground? So far, I think we agree that there are many chemicals already in market that could use closer scrutiny by the EPA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today, we will hear the views of a diverse panel of witnesses on the discussion draft of the Chemicals and Commerce Act released by Chair Shimkus at the end of February. Reforming the Toxic Substances Control Act is a very important task. Chemicals are fundamental building blocks for every substance, either natural or human-made. Years of research, development, and investment have provided us with the tremendous number of products we use each and every day. But due to weaknesses in TSCA, some of the chemicals we encounter in the environment each day are exposing us to harm, and the list of chemicals in commerce has grown far more rapidly than knowledge of their environmental, health, and safety risks. We are all familiar with the old adage, the dose makes the poison. The father of toxicology, Paracelsus, introduced this concept in the 1500s. Well, we have learned a lot since that time about the many factors that influence toxicity of any given substance, but we have not been acting on that knowledge, at least not with respect to industrial chemicals. Since the early 1990s, we have known that infants and children are more vulnerable to environmental exposures than adults, that the incidence of chronic diseases and other developmental disorders has increased, and that we are being exposed to an increased variety and amount of chemicals in air, water, food, and consumer products. In 2000, the National Academy of Sciences attributed 28% of neurological disorders to environmental exposures. Studies of human tissues, first through the National Human Adipose Tissue Study in the 1980s and now through the Center for Disease Control's National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, have revealed that our bodies are retaining a number of chemical substances as a result of environmental exposures. Evidence is mounting that we are not regulating chemicals sufficiently. The costs of this inadequate regulatory system are being borne by the public, at times the youngest members of the public. TSCA was intended to provide information on the health and safety of manufactured chemicals and to give the Environmental Protection Agency the authority to regulate chemicals that had the potential to harm human health or the environment. Well, after 40 years, there has been very little regulation of chemicals under TSCA. We have insufficient health and safety information about many of the chemicals we encounter every day, and even when a chemical presents a known serious risk, EPA has insufficient authority under TSCA to act to protect the public. This situation must change.
The chair now recognizes Mr. Barry Chick. So you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this subcommittee. My name is Barry A. Chick. I'm a board-certified environmental engineer, a certified hazardous materials manager, a certified diplomat forensic engineer, a state of Ohio professional engineer, and an author of a textbook for government institutes on environmental assessments. I'm a co-founder of Naturepedic, a manufacturer of certified organic mattresses and bedding products for children and adults. More importantly, I'm here as a representative of the American Sustainable Business Council, which includes the Companies for Safer Chemicals Coalition, a project of ASBC. The American Sustainable Business Council is a growing coalition of business organizations and businesses committed to advancing market solutions and policies to support a vibrant, just, and sustainable economy. Founded in 2009, ASBC and its organizational members now represent more than 200,000 businesses and more than 325,000 business leaders across the U.S. The Companies for Safer Chemicals Coalition represents a new alliance of companies focused on chemical reform based on the principles of transparency, safety, and innovation. 40 years ago, when I was in engineering school, I was taught that the solution to pollution is dilution. That was incorrect. I soon found out that Lake Erie, which is where I live close to, was dying. However, thanks to U.S. Congress, you passed RCRA. RCRA stopped the poor industry practices of disposing chemicals into the lake and many waterways across the country, of course. To this day, though, you cannot have any commercial fishing in Lake Erie because the mercury level is way too high. The price that we pay is too high. A few years later, I realized, I observed, where the gasoline companies were swearing that you can't make gas without lead. However, our environment was becoming contaminated with all that lead. Well, once again, U.S. Congress stepped into the picture and said, no, you can't do this. And guess what? They stopped their crying, and they made gas without lead, and our cars are doing just fine. 11 years ago, I walked into a baby store to buy a crib mattress for our first grandchild. What I encountered was vinyl with phthalate chemicals, antimony, perfluorinated compounds, flame retardants that included all kinds of really nasty stuff, pesticides, allergenic materials. I was shocked. The moment of truth was when the salesperson told me, come on, knock it off. If it wasn't safe, the government wouldn't allow it to be sold. Well, I knew better. I decided there and then it was time for me to stand up and say no to toxic chemicals in consumer products. I decided to use the power of business to make a difference, and together with my two sons, we created Naturepedic, whose products are now sold by over 500 retailers across the nation. On behalf of the American Sustainable Business Council, Companies for Safer Chemicals Coalition, and on behalf not only of my children and my grandchildren, but on behalf of your children and your grandchildren, I'm asking you to do the right thing again, just like Congress did it in the past. Our chemicals, for the most part, are simply not regulated. Let's be honest. They're really not regulated. Industry reportedly produces about 250 pounds of chemicals every year for every man, woman, and child in this country. And there are over 80,000 chemicals available for industry to use with very little regulation for any of it. This is not good for business. Industry stopped polluting our lakes when the law, supported by science, told them to stop. Industry stopped adding lead to gasoline when the law, supported by science, told them to stop. We need a system-wide change now to tell industry to stop using toxic chemicals in consumer products. We're asking you to restrict or eliminate toxic chemicals, incentivize the manufacture of safer chemicals, create the clarity that we need in the marketplace, remove this unreasonable risk criteria which just doesn't work, hasn't worked ever, and you know it. Create some deadlines, minimum requirements for identifying, assessing, and regulating high priority chemicals, disclose all ingredients to the public, provide health and safety and health and toxicity testing, and avoid providing regrettable substitutes when changing ingredients. Feel free to communicate with me or the American Sustainable Business Council. As well, we have given you some written information. Thank you for your time and consideration.
We need TSCA reform because of the public systematic exposures to industrial chemicals without sufficient safeguards to protect public health. With that in mind, Mr. Chick, your story drives this concern home. I share your instincts to do everything as a subcommittee and committee and Congress to protect our children and grandchildren. When you went to purchase a crib mattress and saw that the available products contained phthalates, brominated flame retardants, and other chemicals, alarm bells went off. What were some of the adverse health effects you were concerned about that could be caused by exposure to those compounds?
I've learned not to talk medicine. I once testified in court and tried that. They beat me up because I'm not a doctor. I'm an environmental engineer. However, that said, the information in the literature is pretty clear. As a matter of fact, if you will allow me, I have something here that I'll quote. This is not from any tree huggers or environmental extremists. This is going to be from the American Academy of Pediatrics, your regular, everyday pediatricians. I have a few quotes for you if you permit me. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that chemical management policy in the United States be revised to protect children. It is widely recognized to have been, discussing TSCA, it is widely recognized to have been ineffective in protecting children. A growing body of research indicates potential harm to child health from a range of chemical substances. There is widespread human exposure to many of these substances. These chemicals are found throughout the tissues and body fluids of children. Manufacturers of chemicals are not required to test chemicals before they are marketed. And I'm going to put just add to it, they're in baby products. They're everywhere. Continuing, concerns about chemicals are permitted to be kept from the public. Those who propose to market a chemical must be mandated to provide evidence that the product has been tested. Okay? That's not me. That's the American Academy of Pediatrics. They're everyday pediatricians. I agree with everything here. The literature is full of information.
Okay. And might I ask if we could have that admitted
Absolutely.
to the record?
Absolutely.
What role do state regulations, including consumer product laws and labeling requirements, have in informing consumers to choose safer alternatives?
Look, the fact of the matter is we have to stop using toxic chemicals in consumer products. If you're not going to do it, the states are going to do it. You can't deny the problem. And if you try to stop the states, you're just going to have some serious public issues. All right? Do not try this preemption thing. The states have the right to regulate their land and their air and their water and the chemicals used and whatever they need to regulate within their states. Please do not try to stop that.
Let me move to Mr. Chick. How would that provision affect companies like yours that innovate safer alternatives?
It would level the playing field certainly for small businesses, and leveling the playing field where everybody has to work by the same rules drives innovation. That's good for business if you level the playing field. And that's what we need to do, is level the playing field. Nobody can put toxic chemicals in their products, period. It will drive innovation and it's good for business.
All right, I appreciate that.
Lastly, the TSCA reform proposals, included in this draft, would create new duties and new requirements for the agency, necessitating additional funds, yet this draft provides no additional resources. For each of the panel, a yes or no, please. Do you support the collection of reasonable user fees to ensure that the APA has the resources to carry out its functions? Dr. Duran?
I would say reasonable is key, but most likely yes.
Reasonable in making sure that they come back to TSCA, to EPA, that office,
Very good.
to have those resources.
Absolutely, of course.
Thank you.
We submitted some data with our package that demonstrates that most small businesses in the country support very strong measures to control toxic chemicals. This position is not a minority position. This is a majority position.
Anybody else?
I'll add something. The low priority issue could be a trap for products that serve at-risk populations like babies and children, pregnant women is an at-risk population. These chemicals can be shielded from further review. I mean, that could be a serious problem. And then you make it worse by shielding these chemicals from states to review them. It's a serious problem. We can't allow that.
Okay.
We want to thank you all for coming. We know we have a long way to go. I guess so. We're going to continue to work. There's going to be another. We believe there'll be another legislative hearing on the draft, maybe an adjusted draft, based upon the consultations we're having. We do want to encourage all stakeholders to continue to work with us. Obviously, we're not going to get, because of the diversity of opinion, we're not going to get everybody 100% on board. Even those who will despise the legislation, we want them to despise it with a smile, that we made a good effort and attempt to move forward. So with that, I appreciate your patience, and the hearing is now adjourned.